MMA Rants and Raves Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix Quarterfinals matchup. Sergei Kharitonov versus Andrei Arlovski. Guys, let's talk about this fight. At the beginning of the fight, you know that these two guys have extensive kickboxing backgrounds and they started in a striking exchange. And if you look at both of the fighters at the beginning of the fight, it seemed like Arlovski had the quickness, showing really good footwork. He was moving around very well. He was moving his head around very well. And then he started with strikes, and he was striking very quick. They were crisp, they were accurate. It seemed like, they were really landing well. A lot of them were landing. And Kharitonov was the guy in the center. It seems like Arlovski was moving around Kharitonov, and Kharitonov seemed to try to be in a stalking type of position, like he was trying to time Arlovski with something. And it seemed like Arlovski was fighting the fight on the outside, and then the distance kind of closed, which it does, in most striking matchups. There's going to be a closing of the distance, and then you're going to see what's going to happen. And then Kharitonov tried to counter, and then, basically you saw Arlovski continue the footwork. He hit some shots on the inside, looked good, and then came to the outside, and, I was like saying, hey, maybe Arlovski's back. He's looking really good, and he really was. The footwork was good. The head movement was good. He was moving around very well. But when the distance started to close later on, and once again, Kharitonov started to hit him. And those shots started to land. And I'm telling you, I've seen this guy's fights before. This guy has bombs. I mean, those hands are very heavy. When he hits people, they're really in big trouble. And he landed some shots, landed a knee. And that knee seemed to hurt Arlovski. It pushed Arlovski back. And he was trying to trap Arlovski. That's what the strategy seemed to be with Kharitonov. He was trying to cut off his movement, trying to trap him, move him up against the cage in a situation where he can't escape. And then he started to land some strikes, the knee, and then a punch which absolutely decked Arlovski, and then he went for some ground and pound and knocked Arlovski out. Now, I wanted to make some points, guys, and this is kind of interesting because I actually had a couple of interviews, one with Mike Schiavello and one with Kharitonov's training partner, Jon Einemo. And I was mentioning, out of all the fighters that were here, I was mentioning that Kharitonov was a guy that, some people don't give enough credit. And I mentioned this to Einemo, and I also mentioned this to Mike Schiavello, out of all the fighters, because there's something about this guy. I mean, I saw the guy up close. I mean, he's a really big guy, and he was sitting right next to Overeem, and he looked big sitting next to Overeem. I mean, he is 6'3", 250. That's what he's listed as. When he came into this fight, he looked bigger than that. He probably had a cut weight maybe to get, to a certain weight or something, but, he looked really big. And, the point about him is he's very well-rounded too. I mean, he's a guy with very heavy hands, and people know about that. Of course, he's K1 level, and that's maybe where that knee came into play. That knee seemed to really affect Arlovski, which set up, the finish. And, there's something else I want to say about him. He's a very cerebral fighter, extremely intelligent fighter. And this comes from his military experience. I don't know if you guys know this. He's a paratrooper. I think he's actually still on active duty. He's a paratrooper in Russia. I mean, coming out of the Soviet Union, these guys are just tough as nails. I mean, psychologically, mentally, very tough. And a fight that comes to mind is a fight against Fabricio Verdum. And guys, if you watch this fight, this is a man that knows how to exploit his opponent's weak point and attack and finish. And that's what he did in this fight. And it's what he did in two other fights that come to mind, which were his biggest victories. The one I'm talking about, of course, is Fabricio Verdum, which I was just saying. If you watch his fight, guys, it's textbook. All right? He knew that he's a K1 level fighter. He's a superior striker to Verdum. And he knows the rules. The rules are this fight is dictated standing up. It's kind of interesting the way people say that the fight can be dictated where one guy wants it to go, like a world-class wrestler can control it on the ground. Well, the rules dictate certain things. The fight starts and stays standing up, meaning if a guy goes on the ground and tells you to come down, he can't do that. The fighter can say, you come up, and he wins that battle, you come back up. And that's what was happening for Verdum. And if you watch the fight, if you watch that fight, you can see that, he was outclassing Verdum. He's just a really good striker, and, he's got very heavy hands, and you can see the marks on Verdum's face. It was really starting to eat up throughout the fight. And, Verdum couldn't get this guy down. He is a combat sambo master, but he was using it as takedown defense to keep this fight standing up. What a brilliant strategy. And when Verdum tried to get him down, his attempts were futile. What he did was, he sprawled. Very good sprawls. His timing was impeccable. And, that's what he was doing. And then when he had top position, he made sure to get out of anything that looked kind of hairy, where, maybe it seemed like Verdum was maybe, trying to get on one of those triangles. He was out of it before Verdum can even get it on. Just a very cerebral fighter. He fought that fight textbook, and got the decision against Verdum, outclassing him in the stand-up, and won that fight. And then if you look at the fight against Overeem, he fought Overeem twice. He lost one fight, and in the rematch, he won that fight. Okay, he won that fight. And I remember that fight, guys, it was scary. He was just throwing everything he could at this guy. He was taking a lot of punishment. And towards the end of the fight, he blasted Overeem, with, some nasty punches. And it was kind of comical, in a way, because you saw Verdum running away. And then you saw the ref running after him. I really don't know what was happening over there. And then you saw the third guy, which was Kharitonov. I don't know if he knew if the fight was over or not. I didn't even know it. I think they were screaming in Japanese. I don't know what was going on, but one thing I did see, I saw that beast Kharitonov running after Overeem and just threw a punch. Looked like he was trying to take his head off. And Overeem just fell against the ropes. And, this guy is, just a beast. His hands are extremely heavy. Combat sambo master. Could really take care of business on the ground. And the proof is another high-profile win against a guy like Mike Russo, who's a UFC fighter right now. You know how tough he is, especially if you watch the fight against Todd Duffy. He submitted this guy. He won by submission, so he can handle himself on the ground. So here you got a guy, I saw this guy, like I said. He's just a huge guy. He has a large, rounded chin. It looks like he can take a punch, and he has taken punches. He can take abuse. He can shell it out. Great ground game. Extremely cerebral. Very intelligent fighter. Like I said, the fight against Verdum, it was all about intelligence, good chin, really heavy hands. Probably some of the heaviest hands in this tournament as far as striking power. He hits really, really hard. And, I said it. I was talking to Schiavello, to Mike Schiavello, and, I was saying I think he can get deep into this tournament. And, there were interesting interviews that I had. You might want to check them out. I left 2 links below the video if you haven't watched them. Really interesting interviews, because they do concern Kharitonov, and that's what this vlog is about. So anyways, it was a really interesting fight, and didn't surprise me at all. A lot of people, they were picking Arlovski. I liked Arlovski, in this fight too. I liked him. I liked Kharitonov as well. I knew it was going to be a tough call. Arlovski does have the resume, former UFC champ, has high-profile knockouts against guys like Roy Nelson. Very tough to knock out. I was talking about that too. So, and there's another point I wanted to make. If you watched, Arlovski in his last fight against Antonio Silva, you know how hard Antonio Silva can hit. After his, fight with Fedor. And he took some shots, he took some shots from Silva. People talked about questionable chin. Arlovski, his chin is not so bad. He took some real big shots there and kept him staying in that fight. Fought a good fight too. It's just that Kharitonov hits really hard. In my opinion, harder than Antonio Silva. Whoever's going to face this guy, better look out. Because this guy has bombs. You hit one of those things, you're in big trouble. Anyway, it was an interesting fight, and would like to know what you thought about the fight and Kharitonov's future in the Strikeforce Heavyweight Grand Prix tournament. Please leave your comments below the video, rate this video, and subscribe, and thank you for tuning in.